Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to an absolutely crazy game with an incredible, really spectacular endgame, really one of the most beautiful endgames that I've seen in my life. Welcome to a crazy gameplay by Hans Niemann against Anish Giri from the Hans Niemann versus the World competition that will follow now in the next couple of weeks. And in this Hans Niemann versus the World competition, Hans is trying to take down the best players. He'll play against many top GMs now from these days, and I think we can agree that many of you probably don't like Hans Niemann, but I really love his games. I really admire his determination, how he can play chess, how he can really find good tactical solutions in a fast way. And he already in this event outplayed Anish Giri in the Blitz competition, so he outplayed one of the best players in the world, Anish, in the Blitz section, and also he's now taking the lead in the classical time format competition against Anish Giri, so they'll also play a rapid section. So see, Hans can really compete against the strongest players in the world, and we know of course that Hans will meet Magnus Carlsen in the semifinals of the Speed Chess Championship in 2024 in September of 2024. It will be also incredible things for us to follow, and I think in the next couple of weeks Hans Niemann will be really one of the most followed chess players in the chess community for sure. So I've sorted out really a beautiful, as I said, game here played by Hans against Anish. Watch now, incredible endgame technique by Hans Moke Niemann. So with the move here, Hans opened with the move e4. We have c5 by Anish, the Sicilian, knight to f3, d6, modern variations. Now after a couple of trades of pawns here in the center, here knight to f6 by Anish. Hans protects, of course, the pawn on e4, and now we have the move a6, which is now the beautiful and dynamic Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. We have now bishop to d3. e5, knight to e2 by Hans, and now bishop to e7 by Anish Giri. Hans simply castles, and also Anish develops now the bishop in a good way, is trying so in some lines, of course, maybe even to break and enter with the move d5. We have now the move f4. Hans doesn't want to tolerate, of course, this structure in the center of the board. If, for instance, in any of these lines black takes, then you're left with an isolated d pawn, which will happen in the next couple of moves, but it's not such I think dangerous position to have here, the isolated pawn from black's perspective, because you can really advance it. You have a great grip around the square d5, so e takes f4, for instance, is also a good solution here for black. But after move f4, we have castling by Anish. We have a4, not allowing also the common move in the Najdorf Sicilian, the move b5, because in many of these lines black could try maybe also queenside expansion. We have queen to c7, and I would say now a pretty equal position here. Anish Giri has still the flexibility to play maybe knight to d7, knight to c6, so I would say also a good position for black. Here we have king to h1, which has been played so far 2 times in chess history. I see already 2 games in the database, but after knight from b to d7, now Hans plays a theoretical novelty, a new move in move 12, bishop to e3, which seems dangerous. Maybe knight to g4 could happen, but that was the beauty about this move, king to h1. You can still retreat with your bishop and compete here on dark squares on the queen side. We have, after bishop to e3, we have rook to c8. Good move also by Anish Giri, trying of course to get use of this open c file, maybe to try to do some dangerous things even around the square c2. We have now the move a5, controlling further the b6 square, rook to e8, and now h3. Here Hans is playing a very aggressive method. He's trying to break and enter here with g4, maybe even f5, to maybe somehow here put some pressure against the black's minor pieces. We have now the move h6 by Anish, also good move, which allows maybe in some lines here black to retreat and have a nice grip here on dark squares, especially around the square g5, because if play knight to h7, then also here you have a great control here around the square, with the support, of course, by the dark square bishop. We have queen to e1. Hans is going now here for some cool attacking methods on the g file. He's trying to play queen to g3 and then put more pressure maybe against the pawn on g7. Knight to c5 by Anish, queen to g3, knight to h5, and now after queen to f2, Anish finally took now the pawn on f4. The line that we have seen previously is not so dangerous for black, because here after bishop to f4, Anish finally got rid of the bishop pair and has now, I would say again, a pretty solid position. But For white, when we watch now this position, it's a good thing that white has a great control of the d5 square. So now d5 makes no sense anymore, and this bishop, this dark square bishop, is a little bit paralyzed, it's a little bit neutralized by its own pawn. And finally, in order maybe to make something with this bishop, you have to develop it there. But then again, the d6 becomes a weakness. So tough position to play, I think, again, for both sides here. As I said, black has the bishop pair, but white has maybe a slightly better coordination, and with this knights especially in the center of the board. After knight f4, bishop to d8, you see Anish has a tough time where to go with the dark square bishop. Knight to d5, hitting the queen. Queen drops back, and now we have queen to d4. Here you could maybe try knight takes d3, maybe to give up the knight for a bishop here, but after c takes d3, maybe something like queen to c2, it doesn't bring you so much. Even if you take here, then you allow basically black to white to come here on the 7th rank, then the queen is coming, then the knight could be very dangerous. So you should not go, I think, here for the b pawn, because white has already many attackers on this side of the board, and when the queen comes into the game, as I said, could be very dangerous. So after knight to d5, that's why Anish dropped back to d7. Hans continues with queen to d4. Here we have bishop to e6, bishop to d5, and now after move knight to d5, finally queen to e6 by Anish. Anish noticed that he needs more defenders in front of the king, because, as I said, white pieces are very dangerous, and in none of these lines you should actually give up maybe here the knight for a bishop, because after something like c takes d3, I think white would then continue with a much better piece, with a much better knight than black's dark square bishop is. So even if you go for a trade, as I said, then you're continuing the game from black's perspective with a worse piece. So after queen to e6, we have now queen to b4. Great move by Hans, putting more pressure against this pawn, but also playing a tricky idea, because actually you cannot take in here the pawn on e4, because after bishop to e4 and queen to e4, then rook to e1 is simply winning the game, because your rooks are disconnected, they're not connected because of this bishop on d8. So here after queen to b4, that's why queen to g6 by Anish. Maybe the best way here is finally to play bishop to g5, again connecting your rooks, keeping your knight still on the board, which is, in my opinion, here really the best solution for black. Not, of course, optimal position also for the dark square bishop, but at least you're doing something. But after queen to b4, Anish played now a very dangerous queen to g6. First of all, what this move is doing is, of course, getting in front of the bishop is not a good solution, but now Hans, I think, played the best idea here, played rook to f3, with the idea maybe to play king to g2, and king to h2, rook to g3, and then maybe also rook to f1, hitting here simply the f7 weakness. So now the queen of blacks becomes actually an attacking solution for white. Black has now a tough time to defend all of the squares on this side of the board. So after rook to f3, rook to f8, now Hans brings, of course, the rook into the game. Good move. Bishop to g5, finally by Anish Giri, but it's a little bit too slow, because now rook to g3 leads into complications for black because of this potential h4 move. Of course, queen to h5 could happen, but still risky. As I mentioned, the knight is simply too powerful. There are even some lines with knight to e7, fork you cannot take, the queen is hanging, so not really an optimal position now for black's queen especially. After rook to g3, that's why Anish played again queen to e6. The queen was already on e6, so now you played a couple of unnecessary moves with the queen. Hans plays queen to d4, good centralizing move, and now g6. Another mistake by Anish. Maybe now finally knight takes d3, c takes d3, and then you could maybe play something like f5. This would be, I think, the best method here for black. And then after something like h4, you still have bishop to f6, because you have to, of course, compete also here on the g file, because there are even some checkmate threats around the square g7. So this was the best move, knight to d3 followed with f5 here for Anish Giri. But after queen to d4, he played now g6, and Hans finds the first really beautiful tactic of this game. Plays now the amazing rook takes g5, sacrifices the exchange, but only temporarily, because after knight to f6 check and king to h8, you have this one, again discovered check, and now you have to play f6, and now Hans, of course, gets the exchange back and has now, again, a better piece, I would say now, because of a bishop to c4, queen to e7, and bishop to d5. Look at this powerful bishop controlling many squares on light squares, and of course is hitting also the weakness on b7. We have knight to g6 by Anish. Hans goes for the b pawn here. We have knight to f4. Not again maybe the best solution here for Anish. Maybe knight to c5 is slightly better. Then you play something like rook to e1, queen to e5, then b4. Still, I would say a much better position for white, but at least you're battling somehow. At least the queen is centralized. But after knight to f4, Hans is saying thank you, I'll take the pawn immediately. Here finally Anish centralizes the queen, but now queen takes a6, and I think now white is a much better endgame here, especially because of two connected passers on the a and b file. We have now f5, we have queen to c4, knight to h5. Anish is threatening the move knight to g3. That's why rook to f3, knight to g3, king to g1, and now after move f4 by Anish, Hans is saying, okay, I'll get my king now here. Applying this defensive idea, hiding behind enemy's pawns. Now basically the pawn on the f-file is standing in the way of the attack by the rook against white's king. Good, really defensive moves here by Hans Niemann. We have king to h7, c3. Hans is preparing, of course, the move b4. We have queen to e7, and now queen to b4. Now comes, I think, the most beautiful moment of the game. Here Anish played the aggressive g4. It's a great move, I would say. When it comes to maybe different positions, it would be very cool to maybe include the queen into the game. And of course the move g4 comes with a threat against the rook on f3. It seems so that white has to react here on the king side, but Hans found really the most incredible idea of this game. Hans played now the amazing queen to b7, sacrificing the rook after the trades of queens here on f3. But now after g takes f3, Hans has very dangerous pawns, and the issue is now that the knight is simply too far away from the action. Now Hans can simply push the pawns, and if maybe he gets two connected pass pawns, maybe on the 6th or 7th rank, the rook cannot of course compete against this pawn. And the cool part is that also the bishop is supporting the AX square, where a potential of course promotion could happen. So that's why Anish had to find now the only solutions like d5, sacrificing the pawn just in order to get now finally the knight into the game, because he wants to get an extra tempo against this bishop with knight to f6. But Hans simply pushes the pawn further, knight to f6, bishop to c6, controlling now the knight, not allowing to get it active here. We have knight to e8. Hans pushes the pawn further, pushes now a new pawn, and you see now, although Anish Giri has an extra rook, it's so tough to defend the position, but it's actually a winning game here for white. Hans calculated everything in a good way. What should you do? If you try here something like king to g7 to maybe get the king closer, then the winning method is this one, c4. Then we push this pawn. You're trying to maybe compete. Then we play c5, rook to c8. You can even sacrifice the bishop here just in order to get this pawn on b7, and again the promotion will happen, and it's again game over here for black. Great moves here by Hans. After move b5, that's why rook to f6 by Anish, trying of course maybe to sacrifice the rook for a bishop or something, then maybe controlling with the knight many of these pawns. But Hans kept it calm, played now the a7 move, rook takes c6, b takes c6, and now g5 by Anish. You see, it seems so maybe that black can finally get the king closer to these pawns, but again, very beautiful moves here by Hans. King to e2, king to g6, getting the king closer, getting it now finally on the most active square, on the square c5. And Hans has also this passer, has here two passers, and has here also a passer. So the position is simply too stretched for black. Black cannot compete on both sides here. So that's why it's of course completely winning endgame. But of course you have to be accurate. After knight to a8, Hans played now the beautiful c7, decoyed now the king to the square, and now a beautiful c8, which makes now Anish Giri react here, and now king to c6. Hans is going into an opposition and has now this passer, and again this passer. But now the difference is that Hans has activated the king further. The king is now closer to the action. Now the king is cornered here by black. It's game over. So after knight to c7, Anish is still trying to battle. e5, knight to a8, we have e6, king to d8, and after king to b7, in this position Anish Giri resigns. So what's the issue? You can maybe try knight to c7, but then we play something like this. The king gets deflected from the defense of the knight. We can of course push also this pawn. So as I mentioned, the position is simply too stretched for the knight. The knight cannot control both sides, and as I said, after king to b7, in this position Anish Giri resigns. So Great game by Hans. Really interesting stuff. How he dismantled here Anish Giri's Najdorf. He's in the lead in classical chess against Anish Giri. His results is so far 3.5 points against Anish Giri's 2.5 points. Anish also won some games, but you see, Hans can really play. Outplayed here one of the strongest players in the world, so Hans Niemann is in top shape for sure. And as I mentioned also many times, he's waiting now for Magnus Carlsen in the semifinals of the Speed Chess Championship in 2024. Okay, congratulations to Hans also for playing this very interesting match against the world. Sort of interesting stuff also here in the Night of Sicilian. If you want to see some other commented chess games here on my YouTube chess channel, check out my playlist, but also here the computer chess playlist where we analyze some beautiful AI chess games. And if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.